Welcome to the inaugural episode of the All New 52 podcast. It's a show I decided I'm going to make where I'm going to talk about comics with my good buddy
Caleb.
Right here, and I'm Joe.
I'm Caleb, as previously established.
So this is just a show that I thought, hey, I like comics. Caleb likes comics.
Some have said.
We like nerding out about comics together.
There have been rumors as of such.
Why not nerd out about other comics together and show each other some new stuff that we might not have read? I was going to say seen, but...
And the perfect way to do that is to read a comic that both of us have read before.
Yeah, well, makes it easy to start off with that. The first comic we're going to be talking about is good old Batman White Knight by the legend himself, Sean Murphy, the savant, some would call him.
So what did Sean Murphy do before this? Because obviously...
I've heard his name before.
He's penned the Murphyverse. So DC must have done something for DC to give him an 8-issue miniseries.
He worked on Joe the Barbarian with Grant Morrison. Don't know about that. Written and drawn the miniseries Punk Rock Jesus.
Oh, I've heard good things about that.
He's worked on Titans and Hellblazer before. Let's see if I can get some actual...
Oh, wait, which Hellblazer? There's a very good chance I have his...
Two issues, number 245 and 246.
Okay, I was about to say there's a very good chance I have some of the issues of his run, and I just haven't gotten around to reading them yet.
He hasn't done an insane amount, but... he doesn't have the giant back catalog that some of the big notable writers do.
But enough to push him into this miniseries... And obviously...
And into his own just world that they're giving him.
This miniseries did well enough that it, extended his reach in the DC lineup. I
mean, starting off with just him, the fact that he's doing the art too, and it's really good art.
Oh yeah.
I'm all for it. Whenever I see that writer-artist combo, I almost always know I'm in for something pretty good. At least the past 2 times. With him and Steven Sepjak, or whatever, however you say his last name. They both do amazing.
So there's this term in film criticism called auteur theory. It's the idea that the director is the sole vision of the film. And I kind of feel one of the cool things about comics is that it's collaborative between the writer, the artist, the colorist. But also, I feel like when you do get that
Wombo combo?
That 1-2 punch. Let's use a comics reference. That fastball special.
Ooh, there we go.
Of a writer and an artist, you do get kind of a pretty cohesive vision. Now, sometimes that doesn't work out, but here...
It's very true. Here, it really works. Okay, so Batman White Knight, it's an alternate universe story, which are kind of the best DC stories that I find myself enjoying. Or, let's not say the best. The ones I find myself enjoying the most. And it's a universe where Batman's a little off his rocker, which, isn't too far from mainline Batman. But he goes a little too far and makes Joker eat a bunch of pills, and it turns him sane.
Yeah. And as Joker regains his sanity, he sees that Batman has been escalating the force and the damage that he does to Gotham. And so he decides he is going to step up and be the one to fix Gotham, to make a Gotham that no longer needs Batman.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those stories where it's like, okay, we've seen this before, but he does it in such a, not even a new way, just
I think Batman, a Batman story critiquing Batman and his methods are not new. And
Joker going sane isn't anything new either.
But I do think that he brings enough to the table that he's able to, if you look at the Batman universe as a bunch of Legos, he's able to put them together into something else. You can recognize, that comes from that set.
He bought a set and then made it into
his own thing.
Yeah.
Because the first thing you notice when you read this is how much Sean Murphy loves Batman. There are
he's such a big fanboy. Not even just comics Batman, just he's a Batman fan. He's seen everything. Probably watched every show.
An issue does not go by that doesn't reference something, whether it's the 89 film, whether it's the animated series. There is a part where you see Joker in his cell and it's surrounded by this Batman merchandise, and it all comes from something. There's stuff from the Lego
all a
movie.
reference to something.
There's stuff from the old cereal.
Which, can be a double-edged sword sometimes, but he just really understands Batman and understands how he can put a twist on it. And just make it super engaging. This book, when I first read it, I think both you and me got it the same way. We had a free comic book day. It was issue 1. I don't know where my original copy went, but I always had it in the back of my mind. And then I got the trade and I was done with it in a day. It's so good. It's
very readable. And I think part of it that is because the love for Batman shows up and reveals itself within what Murphy is showing, because while this is critical of Batman, it never lose sight of down deep, even though Batman is doing bad things in this story, he is a hero.
He's got the city's best interests at his heart, and is in his own like escalative way where he's so full of spite with the Joker. And honestly, Joker's Jack Napier in this, Jack's full of spite for Batman too. They're both, Jack may seem like he's coming at it. It's like, I have the city's best interests in my hearts. And he kind of does too. But they both get clouded by their just absolute spite for each other.
Well, and you kind of see their arcs reverse, where Batman, we're familiar with the Batman who loves the city, but he's just been pushed so far. And when Jack is finally cured, he is just driven by spite. But eventually there's a part where his spite has given way to the love for the city that pushes him.
There's a crossing point where Batman's no longer even in Jack's vision of the city. He's not, I shouldn't let myself get clouded by him.
How much do you want us to spoil?
I know literally a billion things that have happened in comics that I've read before I've read them. Reading it's still great. Spoilers aren't one of those things that bother me with comics unless it's an ongoing series kind of deal.
You kind of have to know at a certain point. Like, you can't read every single thing within a universe, but you
you have to know what's going on.
Yeah, you have to know what, the Phoenix Saga is if you're going to be into Marvel, even if you aren't going to read all of Claremont's X-Men. You need to know the big events. I think that neither Jack nor Batman are really the protagonists of this story. Or at least they're not the sole protagonists.
I think it does switch like a couple times throughout the book.
I think this is a Harley story.
I think it shifts to her. Yeah, I think Jack definitely has the protagonist mantle for the first half of the book.
I think from a more traditional aspect, yes. But I think if you actually look at structurally the story, I think that you realize your perspective has been with Jack, but really all the goals and things that this story is orienting around is Harley. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the spoilers, because there's a status quo shift for how Sean Murphy handles Harley.
I mean, it's a pretty early revelation.
It's in issue 2.
Yeah.
So there are 2 Harleys.
There are. And I think it's one of those genius things where it makes so much sense, and you could easily put it into the mainline thing and no one would bat an eye, really. It makes so much sense with how that character's shifted so much since Arkham Asylum really was it. That was the big shifting point where she went from just, the jester to kind of the hot topic sex icon.
And you're a big Harley Quinn fan.
I am a pretty big Harley fan. It's kind of rested, or that's not the right word, subsided over the past couple of years where I've kind of grown bored with her, but I do enjoy her character quite a bit.
This is my favorite Harley.
It's a really good one.
I kind of went back and forth on that when I initially read this, but having read this a second time for the podcast, I can easily say that this is the Harley. And I think this is what you were getting at when you were saying your alternate universe stories are the ones you really gravitate to. You're able to complete character arcs in ways that you can't in comics, or that would be
because
automatically reverted.
Yeah, because mainline just has to keep going. There is no end goal in sight, and you got so many different writers' visions that constantly are changing a character.
Which is beautiful and fun, but it is interesting to see a story that can take that to the next level. And I feel like that's what happens with Harley in this, is they're able to, we know from context, her backstory and all that, so we're able to move past that into like, what would an end goal Harley look like? And I really appreciate that. Now, I think it's fair to say that this is Jack's story first and foremost. But what really had me going back to it this time around was Harley's story.
I mean, she is the master planner in all of it, as you learn at the end. Is she didn't necessarily have like a flow chart laid out or orchestrated the entire events, but she set this thing in motion. And she I don't want to say she has Jack around her finger, because it sounds like she's manipulating him the entire time. And like, you know, to an extent, she kind of is. But there is this just bond between the two of them where it kind of becomes a love story at a certain point, and not like the twisted love story that our favorite movie, Suicide Squad, made so popular.
Oh, yeah. Was that it? Was that the thing that made it popular?
That was the thing that set it off, okay. I think.
I feel like I saw some stuff. That is definitely where the daddy's little monster Harley came from.
Yeah.
The Harley that becomes the Neo Joker in this version.
Yes. But Harley and Jack, they have a bond for each other, and they want what is best for the city, and like they've been on the bad side of the fist of Batman, really, and they kind of see a way to turn it around.
Yeah, because this is not just Batman hurts people. Did you ever think about that? That Batman hurts people. And then, like, why doesn't he just kill the Joker? Like, the Joker.
That would make things so easy.
But this is actually like, oh, wait, this goes into the politics of the city. It looks at the effects of, like, the financial impact of the city.
How the police kind of just turn a blind eye, and then they're caught, like, just watching horrible stuff happen.
It looks at the how the media handles it. And it looks at how, like, it gives more voice to the citizens of Gotham than many Batman stories. I would still say that, and this is one of the problems I have with the story, is it still kind of sidelines those characters and just makes them vehicles for Jack's character arc. But even within that, I can also acknowledge that this is giving a lot more agency to Gotham itself than most other Batman stories do.
Yeah, I feel like we've been gushing so far.
It's about a good story.
It's a really good story. Another thing I like is this isn't a big Bat family story, but you do have two key components who are kind of left out nowadays, it feels like. You have a much angrier Nightwing, and then a Batgirl who you can tell has been in it for a while because she remembers when things were different, but she's not completely numb to how violent Batman has become.
Yeah, and I love how they kind of ground you in this, like, okay, this isn't just like a Batman who's always been bad. Like, it's
an escalation. Yeah.
We can automatically, when Barbara is, we see the first chase scene, and Barbara's like yelling at Batman to like slow down.
She's like,
careful.
Chill out. You are on a roof right now.
We see it's like, oh, okay, this is not, okay, we know the rules of the universe.
To an extent, I feel like that's part of where, when you get a little nitpicky with it, it doesn't necessarily crumble, but you see there's a few loose staples in the stack of papers.
What do you mean by that?
So you have all this context going into it. Like, this is a similar Batman world so far to like what it's operated. Couple changes. Jason Todd was the first Robin. You have Jack, who makes a very good case for himself, where he was like, I stole a scooter, essentially, that the chase scene that kicks off the book. And he's like, I've never done, or the first thing I did was rob a bank when I got here. That was my first crime that I was arrested for. And automatically 10 years or whatever, I was like, okay, that's putting it kind of light, because, you know, that's a pretty big crime, robbing a bank or whatever. But the way Jack builds his case and how quickly he is forgiven too, makes it seem like he hasn't done quite as heinous of a past that the mainline prime Joker has had.
Yeah, you kind of wonder. I mean, this isn't Killing Joke Joker.
No,
not just because that event didn't happen in this universe, but also because like I don't think that point where like he hit total depravity ever occurred.
This is a much more jokey Joker. I feel like.
I think like animated series Joker, where he's definitely maniacal and like can go to some dark places, but like
he isn't the huge criminal that he's become in the modern age. Really,
you can believe that people maybe are like, well, maybe he didn't kill all those people. You can imagine that there's more moral ambiguity, or at least I could.
It gives it a great case for Jack, where it's like, oh, maybe stuff is different in this universe. But I feel like if you're going to have that, you need to have a Batman side to where, you're not just on his side because it's Batman and you know what's happened because, alternate universe, but some stuff's the same, but stuff might be different and we're not getting the full 2 sides to every story. Well, 3 sides, 1 side, the other side, and the truth. We're missing another side right now because Batman doesn't talk to anyone in this book for the first 6 issues. He's just silent, always focusing on his goal, and Nightwing and Batgirl are trying to get something out of him to figure out how they can help themselves, and he just won't do anything. He will not budge. And that's why I said, when you get a little nitpicky with it, you're losing a couple of the stitches. The wound's coming a little undone.
Do you think part of that is also the pacing of not necessarily the book, but of reading it in a trade?
It might have a little to do with that. I'm pretty sure this book didn't really have much delays. It said it was published between 2017 and 2018 originally. So, an eight issues, 8 months. So you get a little bit of time to feel that, but also I'm not going to judge it in the thing that's like, oh, it was meant to be read in a monthly format. No, it's a complete story. You should be able to read it.
Yeah, it should
front to back.
But I was just thinking about that while I was reading it this time, because at the end you find out that these have spanned a year. And I just wasn't getting that.
No, you don't feel that. I mean, it tells you that at the very beginning because it starts off with Jack walking in on Batman in Arkham, and then it's 1 year ago, and it kicks off everything.
Yeah. So there are textual pieces to that, but I feel like just the experience of reading it in trade, it's kind of like how some shows are better watched week to week than binged. I kind of think this might be a story that it makes it very easy to binge because it is very
it's just such a good page turner.
But maybe it's not the best way to read it. I don't know.
I mean, I don't. That's the only way I've experienced it besides reading that first issue, back whenever it was the free comic book day, because I would assume the series had reached enough of a popularity to be determined to be the free comic book day that year. Do you have any other complaints, really, other than that minor pacing thing?
Well, I'm trying to... Okay, I'll get out my 2 small complaints.
Okay.
First, and then I have a bigger one, which you can decide whether you want to cut out or not.
Okay.
The first one is, and it's so small, but Batgirl has this posture collar. She doesn't have a full cowl. She has a domino mask and a posture collar. The posture collar is really distracting. It's so silly. And it just kind of scrunches up her face into these weird expressions.
I like Batman's collar. I keep forgetting it's there, and then there'll be panels with him, and it's just cowl and collar. Mm-hmm. But then you'll see a full panel of him, and you don't really register the collar.
It's very mucky art in the sense that a lot is left in the shadows.
It's super stylized.
Yeah. Oh, and I love, the only reason I bring up Batgirl's collar is I love almost everyone else's costume a lot. Especially Poison Ivy's got a great costume in this. But it's just that collar was very distracting. The other one is there are a couple times when the references get in the way and just kind of pull you out.
In what sense?
So I'd say he uses 3 kind of references. He uses one where he just pulls something in from other media. So the Tumblr is in this.
Yeah, and they call it the Tumblr.
Yeah, but he there's a mechanical reason why he is using the tumbler, because it's able to do something that the other Batmobiles aren't supposed to do. That's the best kind of reference, because it's just pulling in another piece. Then there are just kind of the fun, cheeky references where like Joker will get all the villains together and make a reference to a animated series episode. Small stuff, that's fine. But then there are just some stuff that's a little bit too crammed in there. So like Mr. Freeze will make he'll be like, no more ice puns. I'm like, you haven't made a single ice pun. You are the most serious character in this story. Yeah. And I get it. Sean Murphy, you like me, like Batman and Robin. I can tell because you're remaking things from Batman and Robin in this story, and I appreciate it. But maybe that joke didn't land.
I gotcha.
But it's stuff like that.
I gotcha.
The bigger complaint
I was going to say, I was like, there's a bigger one. You kind of stopped where it seemed like you weren't going to go into it.
Well, and I wanted to give a nice break just in case you to cut this out. From a socio-political perspective.
Oh boy.
And now you understand why you might want to cut this out. I'm not I just go back and forth on how well this handles things like police brutality, like race. Like there's some stuff I really appreciate.
I was going to bring this up with you because I read this maybe a year ago at this point, like completely for the first time. Now reading it now with everything that's happened in 2020, those first two issues they ring a whole new kind of meaning now because they go over the same topics that we've kind of talked about over the summer.
Yeah. And I just, sometimes I really appreciate like seeing that kind of stuff reflected back to me. Like there is a part in the story where the police and Batman stand off against a peaceful protest. And what we see there is what happens in my experience, having gone to these protests in reality, which is Batman and the police escalate.
Yeah.
And then that escalation gets blamed on the protesters.
Yes.
So I appreciate that, but also then it's just when you start to bring those real world aspects in the story, whenever they begin to rub up against the more comic aspects, I feel like there's just some fracturing in the quality of the storytelling, because you can talk about these things, but it takes a lot, and I mean a lot of care to talk about them in a story where you also have a man who has an ice gun and and a big crocodile man.
That is very true. I think it does a good job for the most part. It never goes, insanely deep in these topics, but they also talk about how, hey, there's this secret fund for Batman damage that is $3 billion a year. Maybe we need to just redistribute this money. Yeah. And they never go too deep into it, but it's like, there's an idea and they just roll with it.
Yeah. And that's just the thing where it's like, maybe I'm being unfair to this story because it is being told in this world, but they defund Batman by funding the police.
Yeah. I raised an eyebrow at that, but we don't have an idea on they talk about, it's like, oh, the cops are kind of corrupt in this book. We don't know. Yeah.
What they end up doing with that money, I think makes sense for this world, but it's also the exact opposite of what I would want to see in the real world.
But yes, in this comic book world where a man runs around in a bat costume and is more powerful than the police.
Yeah. It's just a little tough to square those edges. And let's be honest, you don't always have to square those edges. Sometimes a story is better when it does leave those gray areas for you to, parse out.
Yeah. Not make everything so black and white. Give the reader a little bit of their own. Let the reader be a little bit smart.
Well, yeah, and apply it to the real world in ways that you couldn't in the story.
Another thing I liked a lot, real quick. Alfred is used in a very minimal, but I think super powerful way, where you find out in the beginning he's dying. Bruce has teamed up with Mr. Freeze to use the same treatment, I guess you'd call it, to try to save Alfred's life. But then... Is it the protest when Bat goes a little overboard, or is it a little after that? No. It's when he goes into the library.
Is it? Yeah, it's the library.
Yeah, there's another chase scene with a bunch of the villains that Jack has mind controlled, and Bruce gets pretty heavily injured, so he goes back to the cave to treat his wounds, and he passes out. Alfred wakes up and hooks him up to the same treatment thing that he's on, but it kills Alfred because he's on life support essentially. Yeah. And you just get this sense that ever since Alfred has gone down or got knocked out, he's kind of the link to society, like acting like a normal human being that Bruce lost, and that's kind of what sent him on kind of the escalation path. Sent him on the escalation path, and then once he does die, you see a shift in how Batman's acting. Like, he's not nearly as rash anymore. He's not so closed up.
It explains. Yeah. Which I think a lot of times when you're like, what about hero but bad? They don't explain. Mm-hmm. But this gives a motivation. And I appreciate that.
It's just a solid story.
Now, you have not been keeping up with modern Batman.
No, I haven't.
But it is insane to look at this and see how, intentionally or not, it kind of paved the way for what would go on in the Joker War event that just wrapped up. With kind of that relationship, we see Batman without Alfred, with how the Joker, how different people interpret what happens with the Joker, even down to like some of the stuff with the police. And there is an obvious link, which I won't get into yet. I feel like when we inevitably look at Joker War, we can talk about this more. There is a clear link between Neo Joker and Punchline, the new Joker sidekick in the Batman stories.
I think Sean Murphy just knows what's going on, and I always get torn with this type of story because it's such a lightning in a bottle where it's so good. It's good the entire way through. There's not a bunch of holes that are just making it fall apart. And you're like, this is perfect. Don't mess with it. But it's comics. They want money. We have Curse of the White Knight that just wrapped up. And he already had a Mr. Freeze spinoff. Don't know if it was a mini series or a one-off, but he's still going. And I think it's greenlit for another series.
There's a Harley Quinn series, right?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Okay. I thought I saw something on the shelf related to that. But my wallet can only allow so many Black Label books. But you haven't read any of that stuff yet?
I haven't. I'm waiting for the paperback to come out because right now it's in a hardback format, The Curse of the White Knight. It's wrapped, and like they have the trade out for it, but I don't want a paperback of just normal White Knight and then Curse of the White Knight to be hardback. That's just from a collector's standpoint why I'm waiting on it.
Well, I guess then we can't dip our toes into the rest of the Murphyverse yet, but I can deal with that. Did you have any, this is going to be weird, but did you have a favorite, like, single panel?
Not particularly. There's a fun, it's the Harley fan of me and I don't really like Harley with Joker, but they do so well in this because it's not Joker, where he like takes her out on a date night and then she proposes to him at the end of it all. I just really like that sequence of events.
Yeah. There is an early image of the one I brought up of Joker in his cell around his Batman merch. And there's so much loving care.
Is that the one where Harley's like naked in the background?
No.
There's a lot of Batman merch in that one. That's what I'm thinking of.
That one too. This is earlier on when he just got caught and put back into Arkham. But it had so much loving care put into it. Any small moments that you haven't been able to talk about?
I think we've gushed about this issue.
I really like Neo Joker and Mad Hatter's relationship.
I like their relationship. Neo Joker is one of those things I think is a little bit on the weaker side, but she's kind of just a force to bring the story together. I don't think she's incredibly huge.
Better in concept than execution?
Yeah, for sure. That's fair. There's 8 issues. There's only so much you can give so much depth. Like, I'm not going to complain that other villains are underutilized. They're not the focus.
We didn't get enough ventriloquist.
We didn't get enough that girl who's perpetually little.
Baby doll.
Other than that her and Croc are definitely doing it.
Baby doll. Although, this story has much more baby doll and ventriloquist than most Batman stories.
Very true. So, next, I'm going to get my issue for the next episode, or my book.
Yeah, we're trading off these, and since we kind of agreed on this one, and this is your show, you are the Adam West, I am the Burt Ward.
Yes.
What will you have me read, Master Bruce?
Well, does he call him son in the old chum?
Old chum.
Old chum. We're gonna read the series that I've grown super fond of lately. We're gonna do Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1.
Holy Brian Michael Bendis Batman.
I was gonna do Silk, but we both read that.
I think this is good because in these first couple episodes, we're going to get like our favorites out of the way. So we've gotten Batman out of the way. You're getting Spider-Man out of the way. I might have to hold off on Zatanna for a minute, just because I have not collected enough of that to make you read it.
Yeah.
But I'm excited that we'll get to talk about your favorite superhero, Spider-Man.
Well, I think that would, just about do it for this episode. For everyone who's made it all the way to the end, thank you. I appreciate it a lot. And join us when the next episode comes out. I think we're going to be doing it bi-weekly, so it gives us enough time for Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1.
Can I do a call to action?
Yes.
Hello, fellow sidekicks of the all-new 52 podcast. It's me, Burt Ward. I'm not sure if Burt Ward's still alive. This might be extremely disrespectful, but we're going for it anyway.
He is alive.
Guys, if you could give us a review and a rating, that helps us pop up in the charts. And if you have any ideas about these stories, do we have any way for them to contact us?
For feedback and suggestions of your own, you can send an email to allnew52podcast@gmail.com.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Father.